As I've mentioned in previous videos and posts, the Uranian energy and the Plutonian energy are the primary distinguishing energy signatures of ascending souls, aka chosen ones, separating them from descending souls. And Uranus is that which breaks out of the pattern and established system and paradigm and breaks out of a cycle. Uranus and Aquarius both are related to exiles and to be cast out of a group for being different. More broadly, that also means to be an outlier or exception to a pattern or a mutation. That which shakes things up with injections of novelty, which challenges the stagnant structures of how things have been remaining. And this is the Saturn. That spark of Uranus' novel creation and mutation set against Saturn's limitation and insistence on a stagnant lack of change and inflexible structure is the dance between Chokhmah and Binah in Kabbalistic terms. If it was just Saturn and just Binah, there would be nothing, because nothing would ever happen. And there would be nothing to shape or give form, only a completely unchanging pattern that consists of no content and no steps. If it was just Uranus and just Chokhmah, there would also be nothing, as there would be no separation or distinctions, just a creative impulse with no structure to give it shape, no up and down, no hot and cold, just one nebulous, creative maybiness existing all at once with no time to separate it. Thus, the joining of Saturn and Uranus allows for the most basic dynamics of creation, and for things to take form, and for them to be separated by moments of time, because Saturn insists on separations and visions, and Uranus insists on change and motion. And our experience of time is just different, distinct forms of things in motion. Really think about that. Our experience of time is just different, distinct forms of things in motion. And this is a fact a lot of people overlook, is that if there were no distinctions you could notice in the world, it'd be impossible to perceive time, because time is perceived by things changing. So if everything stood still, or if there were no things to change from one to another, it would appear that there is no time. And so the mutation of patterns makes up the experience of time, because it allows us to see certain forms of things transform into certain other things. If I was in your bed, if I was in your bed and then I was in that same bedroom but standing by the window, at the most basic level, you could infer that time has elapsed, because me in the bed is not the same as me standing by the window. But the quantum spookiness begins when you follow the Plutonian current inward. And the more inward you go, the more you realize that everything is the same one thing. Everything is, as they say, quote unquote, source. And everything is the one consciousness of God, right? And so if we agree on all our previous premises, that means that time can't actually be real, because time is marked by things and situations turning into other things and other situations. And if everything is all just one thing without true distinctions, or more accurately, illusory distinctions, then that would necessarily have to mean that time itself is also an illusion. And this is a very common impression that people who have near-death experiences claim. Most near-death experiencers claim that the realm they go to in their NDE is a place where everything exists all at once, and there's basically no real sense of time. This is a very similar sentiment to the one shared at the end of Dante's Paradiso, the third and final entry in the trilogy of the Divine Comedy. Most are familiar with the first entry, being Dante's Inferno, which features a stratified and hierarchical series of layers of hell. But in Paradiso, Dante works in the opposite direction, ascending the stratified and hierarchical layers of heaven to reach the Coelum Imperium, aka the Empyrean, the fiery throne of God himself. When he arrived there and looked upon God's visage, as summarized by the YouTuber Wendigoon, quote, immediately all memory is wiped from his head, because memory, as Dante describes it, is a human need for an inferior existence. We don't exist all at once. We work through time. So because of that, we have to remember our past. But when looking at God, all desire, all needs, all of existence was completely put away. Because as Dante says, all of love and desire was gathered in this one image. And because of that, his memory left him, as he simply didn't need it anymore. Because of that, Dante cannot remember directly what he saw to write about it now. He said, quote, as if it were a dream that when you wake up, you completely forget, but the emotions and the feeling of those images still remains present, end quote. And Dante says that now, while writing, he can still feel an infinite satisfaction and love within himself. He describes what he sees as the universal form, and he says upon viewing it, his existence was removed from time itself. In that moment, which could have been seconds or eons, he was infinitely satisfied. He refers to it as an abyss of radiance, where all is complete. He says it's as if every single piece of his existence and his experience on earth, all the people he ever met, all of nature, all of politics, all of everything, were pages. And just now he's realizing that they were all pages laid about but not complete. And that looking at this image of God was as finally viewing the entire book. It was the solution. It was the purpose. It was the universe and man's purpose all in one sight. He couldn't determine where the image began or ended at, but he says that it absorbed all of goodness and desire, and that he understood, finally, that all good things and love itself that comes from earth actually comes from this single image. End quote. Great summary from Wendigoon. And so this description relates very closely with a lot of the things I talk about on this channel. Near the end of that description was an almost identical description to Plato's description of the form of the good, which Plato claimed was the primary form from which all other Platonic forms and archetypes spring. We had the description of God as being the, quote, purpose, which relates to my description of Pluto as being related to absolute meaning, in that Pluto rules absolute things and ultimatums, as well as the penetrating search for meaningful experience. And in being absolute meaning, and Paradiso's description of God as completion with no beginning or end, and just an abyss of radiance, we have very direct parallels to the real-life first-person experience of Barden School meditators and magicians like Mark Rasmus and Bob from 60 Skills of Meditation, who describe non-dual light as, quote, just being light with no real discernible qualities, but also the encounter of which gives the sense that what's happening there is extremely important, end quote, and therefore extremely implicitly meaningful. as if being the source of meaning and purpose itself. We also have my descriptions of Neptune, as upon encountering this level of God, all memory is immediately dissolved due solely to the let me read that again. Sorry, folks. We also have my descriptions of Neptune, as upon encountering this level of God, all memory is immediately dissolved due solely to the sense of completion and indistinct unity as being the one, and therefore it has a property of rest and dissolving memory. We saw that in Paradiso. When it rains, it pours, guys. My screen just turned off. Yeah. Another crucial detail will circle us back around to my original point regarding Uranus and chosen ones. And that detail is that in Dante's Paradiso, the layers and levels of heaven are the planets. I don't mean that's my interpretation. I mean, in the work entitled Dante's Paradiso, Dante Alighieri literally wrote that the levels of heaven ascending to God were the moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Christians, upon hearing me say this, are perplexed and are digging through Google for a PDF of Paradiso to try to disprove it. But that's what brings me back to my original point. Uranus signifies independence, dependence on what's inside of you rather than what's outside of you, including dependence on independent critical thinking. The masses of humanity have unconsciously absorbed all kinds of conditioning and propagandic false information, and it's created false groupthink based on a lack of independent investigation. This is Saturn's correspondences of ignorance, deception, and rigid structure. And Uranus upends these things with independent thought and expression that is mutating, changing, but is also very disruptive, jarring, and outside of the comfort zone of accepted beliefs. With Saturn, your eyes are closed and blinded, but Uranus violently shakes you awake. Okay, why am I talking about this? Well, I bring all that up to say that just one of an enormous number of examples of unconsciously accepting false perceptions and claims is the modern idea that Christianity was always divorced from and in condemnation of astrology. Basically, any amount of research disproves this a million times over. And yet the power of thoughtless and blind groupthink is so powerful that the average church would consider this a radical, heretical, and ahistorical claim. No, this is not ahistorical. The majority of lay people in the medieval and Renaissance period combined their Christianity with astrology. They viewed the heavens literally as the heavens, and that the moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn were layers and levels of the heavens which lead to the abode of the fixed stars and the prima mobile beyond that. And then the Coelum Imperium, the actual throne of God beyond even that. Their view of the heavens was Christian and astrological. If this sounds incredulous, just read E.M.W. Tilliard's The Elizabethan World Picture, which is a work of historical nonfiction by an esteemed Cambridge University scholar and not an astrologer, occultist, or metaphysician on any level. The existence of monks like Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite led to associations of his 9 tiers of angels with the 7 planets, abode of the fixed stars, and prima mobile amongst many of the lay people of the medieval period and Renaissance. Christianity and astrology were so married during these periods that a prolific, high-profile, and highly sought-after horary astrologer in William Lilly could publish a work called Christian Astrology and not be burned at the stake for heresy, and instead be celebrated as were many other so-called occultists who also released works on metaphysics, magic, and astrology under the banner of Christianity, like Giordano Bruno and Marsilio Ficino and many others. All of this to demonstrate how easy it is for this matrix that is the Kali Yuga and Saturn's perverse influence to indoctrinate the vast majority of people into false and inaccurate perceptions, which lead to the fragmentation and non-integration of knowledge, such that every piece of this puzzle we call the divine is separated into different camps, tribalistically. The Kali Yuga has ensured that Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Taoists, astrologers, Kabbalists, Neoplatonists, Hermeticists, and even New Agers all condemn each other and each other's teachings as heretical, so they can never be joined. This is a problem, because each spiritual school only has part of the puzzle, and by being conditioned to condemn the teachings of all other schools, it's ensured that the puzzle can't be completed to see the full picture. And so this is Saturn's fragmentation via fear and tribalism, creating guaranteed ignorance in the Saturnian age that is the Kali Yuga. Universalism and perennial philosophy are basically necessary to see reality and the divine as they actually are, as a complete picture. And that brings me to the number 12. 12 is often seen as a number of completeness or perfection across many cultures, religions, and systems. This symbolism stems from its frequent appearance in both natural cycles and human constructs. The number 12 is deeply embedded in our understanding of time and the cosmos. A year is divided into 12 months, and the day is split into 2 cycles of 12 hours on a traditional clock. This connection to the calendar and the clock links 12 to the idea of a complete cycle or a full measure of time. Additionally, the 12 zodiac signs represent a complete cycle of the heavens. In many religions and mythology, 12 holds significant spiritual weight. In Christianity, there were the 12 apostles, representing the foundation of the church, and the 12 tribes of Israel, symbolizing the complete body of God's people. Ancient Greek mythology featured the 12 Olympian gods who collectively ruled the cosmos. In Judaism, the number 12 is central to the history of Israel. As mentioned above, the 12 sons of Jacob became the heads of the 12 tribes. The number 12 also appears in various human systems and measurements. A dozen, for example, is a fundamental unit of counting that's been used for centuries, making 12 a complete and convenient group. In law, a jury consists of 12 members, reflecting the idea of complete and fair representation. This pervasive use in different areas of life reinforces its symbolic meaning of a whole or a complete set. We should really always start with astrology, because many spiritual sciences contain a lot of lofty claims, and there's many mythologies and claims in all these religions. But astrology isn't made up of mythologies. It's a verifiable science which can be tested and has been tested for millennia to be basically 100% true and demonstrable, at least as it comes to traditional astrology. Yes. 12 months. 1 month, 30 days. 12 signs. 12 houses. 12 times 30. It's 360 degrees. A perfect circle. The zodiac wheel. A year, roughly 360 days. 12 times 3. 36 decans. 12 and 360. A perfect circle. Completion. In this circle, opposing forces directly across from each other, with the sun as the central planet, which moves all the rest. From the standpoint of the Earth, one planet out from the sun is Mars. One planet in from the sun is Venus. Opposite planets, where Mars rules Aries, and directly opposite, Venus rules Libra. 2 planets out from the sun is Jupiter. 2 planets in from the sun is Mercury, where Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and directly opposite Mercury rules Gemini. Let me read that again. It's all in how you say it. Where Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and directly opposite, Mercury rules Gemini. 3 planets out from the sun is Saturn. 3 planets in from the sun is the moon, where Saturn rules Capricorn, and directly opposite, the moon rules Cancer. Opposing magnets and a 360-degree pendulum. You know, that's my problem, is that people either don't think at all, or when they are all intellectual and everything they have this super, oh my God, read it better, dude. Okay, here we go again. On my own. You know, that's my problem, is that people either don't think at all, or when they are all intellectual and everything, they have this super trivial intellectual wanderlust where they try to absorb as many disparate facts as they possibly can. So many astrologers are all into super quintuple backflip advanced techniques, like, hey, let's zodiacal release from the lot of Nemesis using a constellational zodiac and a progressed chart to consider the significance of a heliacal rising Eris conjunct Lilith halfway into its synodic cycle. You know, my first real talent was as a musician, particularly a classical guitarist. And I remember this real big time maestro of classical guitar turned teacher at the University of Miami came into my classical guitar class one day and would have us just play a scale. Just play a scale. I mean, just a scale. It's like playing do, re, mi on your instrument. And he was like, nope, not perfect. Nope, you don't really get it. He went one by one, everybody in the class. And I mean, everyone in class was all hyped up to play their super intricate technical classical guitar solos for him. And he was just like, yeah, most people are excited for that when I come around, but I like to just have them play a scale because it shows you how even something so simple is easy to mess up. There's so much depth and intricacy and precision you have to have even with something very simple. So you just got to imagine this whole class getting humbled, right? Because they thought they were going to show off their solos and their fucking major scale is apparently not good enough. Man, I love that guy. That was such a good lesson. Because like I said, people do it all the time. They want to get to more technical, more technical. They have this intellectual wanderlust and want to acquire more and more complexity and more information. But really, they have no depth or precision of knowledge. They don't want to master the basics. I mean, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything. I've basically kept it under wraps for most of the videos I've made on this channel, but I've trained traditional astrology under Christopher Warnock. Trained horary astrology, electional astrology, astrological magic. I've gotten into Hellenistic astrology. I'm more or less an intermediate to advanced level astrologer. But there's no reason anyone needs to know that. On this channel, if you really pay attention, I've only really talked about the planets. The planets are like the do-re-mi major scale of astrology. It's like the most basic of the most basic. I swear, this classical guitar teacher was like to the class one by one. Okay, so your major scale is a little fucked up. Try this. Try just the first 2 notes. Oh my God. The humbling. So on that thick E string of the guitar, it was middle finger, pinky. Middle finger, pinky. Do, re, do, re. And he'd have people do that for like hours. And then he'd say, okay, you think you're ready for the next note? Fucking hilarious, dude. But what am I supposed to say? These were students in basically the highest level of a high school guitar class, and they literally can't play a fucking major scale if you really pay close attention. So you gotta start them from the basics. You know, funny thing, same thing with astrologers. If I took on a student, I'd bring them outside during the day. I'd point up and I'd say, "What's that?" They're like, quote, "That's the sun." I'm like, "Okay, what does it mean?" Okay. I'd bring them out at night. I'd point up. "What is that?" They're like, "That's the moon." I'm like, "Okay, what does it mean?" I'm not kidding when I say most people really can't give a good answer to this question. Which is crazy, right? These are people that are learning all type of hyper-technical, spiritual, lyrical, miracle techniques, but the most basic spheres of the heavens that everyone sees every day, that even like basic low-level witches use, they can't really give a good answer. They haven't really taken the basics to their depth. And that's a mistake, because if they did, they would learn underlying principles that make everything else fall into place in a very deep and impactful way as far as their understanding. And I'm not here to give an entire introductory course on astrology, but I do want to focus on a certain aspect of the sun and moon that's very basic and primary to astrology, but which everyone kind of half listens to and rushes off to the next thing without fully understanding. Okay, so to put the obvious masculine and feminine characteristics to the side, the sun radiates outward and is an active principle which asserts itself on what's around it. Okay, this is why everything revolves around the sun and is considered the king and commander of the planets. The moon receives and reflects the light of the sun. It's a passive principle, and it receives and absorbs. So the name of the planetary intelligence of the moon is Malcha Betirshishim Boad Rokuta Shiachlim, and it means the intelligence of intelligences. And it's called that because it is the main receiver of all of the other stellar rays of the planets. Meaning, like a sponge, it absorbs the light of all the spheres above it, and it gives it conception so it can be brought into material form. So this is just one aspect, okay? One aspect of the sun and the moon. The definition isn't even done yet. But even with this one aspect alone, we can take things so much deeper, and we have to, because this contains a really critical principle regarding astrology that so many people overlook. The sun is the actor. Think about that. Actor, putting on a performance, but also actor in the sense that it asserts and acts upon things. And the moon is the receiver. It's what's acted upon. So that's like very basic. But here's a question that a lot of astrologers can't answer. I have in my natal chart the aspect of Venus opposite Mars. That's a nasty one, actually. The Mars is retrograde in the 12th house within 5 degrees of the ascendant. The Venus is in the 6th house, so a lot of accidental debility. And to make matters worse, the opposition is applying by not 3 degrees, but 3 minutes. It's basically a perfect aspect. And it's an opposition, which is the worst aspect. But generally speaking, what does this aspect mean? Well, a lot of the sex-obsessed synastry astrologers will be like, ooh, this means if one person's got the Mars and the other has the Venus, this is like a spicy relationship with a lot of passion. But really, this aspect indicates a tendency to end up in abusive situations where, the Venus, the act of the interpersonal bonding, maybe at the friend level, maybe at the romantic relationship level, very often it'll turn into harsh or abusive situations, right? That's the Mars. Okay, seems simple enough. But the much more challenging question that most astrologers would struggle with is, quote, with this aspect, you'll end up in an abusive situation. But who's the one who's going to be abusive? And who's the one who's going to be abused? Crickets. Right? That would require more of an advanced technique. But the question itself raises an important point. That in any astrological configuration, there's the actor and the recipient. The one who asserts and acts upon, and the one who receives and is acted upon. This is in everything. A Jupiter transit can indicate an act of charity, but that means that one person in that situation is the benefactor and the other is the beneficiary. Okay, so this is one of the most basic concepts in astrology, but it's one that so many people have overlooked because intellectually they want to rush to the new, hot, sexy technical concepts. If you look closely, this principle is everywhere. Let's look at the houses. I'm using the houses in traditional astrology, which is different from how modern astrologers define them. They tend to kind of just correlate the signs all ABC-like with the houses. It's not really how the houses work. But to demonstrate this point, it's great to start with horary astrology. This is the astrology of answering questions. It's kind of like astrology's answer to tarot. You can't do horary astrology without using the houses. It's completely dependent on highly technical uses of the houses. But the most popular and basic question any horary astrologer can be given is, will I get the girl? Or turn it around, will I get the guy? But let's just say, will I get the girl? This is one of the purest and most simple horary questions for a couple reasons. In a horary, the ruler of the first house signifies the querent, which is the person asking the question of if they'll get something. And the ruler of the seventh house is the quesited. It's the person or thing being asked about that the querent is trying to get. But also the first house just naturally signifies the main character and selfhood, while the seventh house naturally signifies one-on-one relationships, romantic partners, and marriage. So in that horary, there's the self and the other person. And one is the actor, and the other is the one acted upon. And we'd compare the planet ruling the first and seventh house at the moment the question was asked to see how well they line up. Let's take it to the next house. The second house, it deals with money, assets, and possessions. What does the eighth house have to deal with? Well, death, yes, but also inheritances from those deaths, and other people's money and other people's possessions, particularly your spouse's money. Why is that? Because the first house is the self. And so the second house from the first house is the possessions of money, is the possessions or money of the self, okay? The second house from the first house is the possessions or money of the self. But if we take the second house from the perspective of the spouse, which is the seventh house, it's like the second house of the spouse. This is called turned houses, where we treat another house like the first house of the self to represent another person or thing, and then treat every house that comes after it as if it's the same sequence of houses. Okay, so the second house from the seventh house of the spouse is the eighth house. So the eighth house is like the second house of material possessions and money and assets from the perspective of the spouse that is the seventh house. Okay? But we see again this pattern of actor and recipient. Because if I have a wife, she's my seventh house. And my second house is where all my possessions are. So if I die and she gets my stuff, she's not getting her second house. She's getting her eighth house because I'm her spouse. So my second house is going to my eighth house, and her eighth house is going to her second house. You see how this works? One is acting and the other is being acted upon. Okay, this is all throughout all the houses. You can do turned houses on every house because every house is the opposite of the house across from it, right? So If I wanted to know something about my spouse's third house, right? I would address the ninth house, because we would turn that chart to where the seventh house is the first house. And if the seventh house is the first house, the third house from the seventh house is the ninth house, right? So you can do turn houses with every house, right? Okay, so Saturn's return. Great astrology lesson. But what's the meaning of all of this? Why even bring it up? I bring it up because if everything that happens is the cycle of the heavens, and the cycle of the heavens is complete and 360 degrees, and that cycle is not just made up of oppositions, but also positions of actor and recipient, that means that reality itself is an engine that's trying to give you a complete 360 degree understanding of every situation you put yourself in. Because every planet proceeds through every sign and every house. Okay? So this is kind of a correction for a lot of people's understanding of what karma is. Karma isn't punishment, and it's not cause and effect. The cause and effect definition always makes me laugh. I think it's kind of a safe sort of materialist way of defining karma that comes from Buddhism, because Buddhism likes to kind of straddle the line between spiritual and materialist. So you get kind of nebulous definitions like that. I mean, it's like saying, if you do a something, then a something else happen. I mean, geez, someone get this guy a Nobel Peace Prize right now. Genius. But no, I mean, astrology is literally telling us how reality works. We reincarnate such that we have a 360 degree understanding of every situation we involve ourselves in. So at a really basic level, karma is just putting you in the position of an actor, and then later, maybe lifetimes later, it'll put you in the position of a recipient, right? The Jupiter can be in the second house, but eventually you'll be born with Jupiter in the eighth house. Put it together. The zodiac itself is self-reflecting. The zodiac itself is self-reflecting. And the consciousness of God that makes up all experience is also reflecting, because God is a mirror God. Are we getting it? So karma isn't just abusing people and then ending up as the abused one in pretty much the same situation in another lifetime. Karma is a panoramic 360 degree way of understanding every situation you put yourself in from every position by being born into every vantage point of that situation over multiple lifetimes. Every action you take will place you as the recipient of that action. This is the way by which God knows itself, by fragmenting itself into 10,000 things, and the 10,000 things all are reflections of each other that don't know it yet because of Saturn's illusion of time separating moments. Yep. I say mirror reflections, but you can also view reality as a 360 degree series of pendulums. For example, I see this a lot in people that practice astrological magic, right? And they're all about Jupiter, Jupiter, Venus, more benefic, more benefic. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, you're putting a lot of attachment into pleasant worldly things. I hope you understand that you're adding more force to the pendulum by doing that. We remember again that the zodiac is made up of planets and signs that are opposite from each other. So if someone is all about Venus magic, you know, love magic, hedonism and all that, over the course of lifetimes, that pendulum has to swing back to Mars, because directly opposite Libra is Aries. So you've added that much more attachment to venereal things by indulging in all that Venus magic and getting all that excess love and sex and friendship and partying and everything. But the seasons don't stop being the seasons. Mars still has to burn all that stuff away, and it will burn it away in equal measure to how much you artificially inflated the Venus in your life with that magic. I'm a trained astrological magician, but me myself, I don't do any practical planetary magic on myself or make talismans for myself because I know what happens after we die and what we have to deal with in lifetimes after. I understand these metaphysics and pendulum like reflecting nature of reality. So that's why I don't really do practical magic, even though I know how to, and I just stick to theurgy, aka high magic. I trust my personal diamond and God's providence to give me the natal chart that I'm supposed to have rather than doing these planetary energy transplants that the astrological magicians are doing. Recipe for disaster, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there, or maybe it is, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about, people they die and they encounter like a spirit that feels like they owe them a debt. And I've been talking about this a lot. It's like, when you're doing astrological magic, you're making a request of the spirits of a planet. It's kind of like going to the Godfather, and asking for. It's exactly like that, right? You come to me on the day of my granddaughter's wedding or whatever. You know what I mean? You're supposed to go to the Godfather on the day that he's in a great mood. That's why you go to the Godfather on the day of his daughter's wedding. And in the same way, astrological magicians, they'll wait till the sun is in Leo or Aries, where it's dignified before the astrological magician asks the sun for things, right? It wants the sun to be in a good mood. It doesn't want to be in Aquarius, doesn't want to be in Libra, these places where the sun doesn't do very well, where the sun's in a bad mood. So they go to this mob boss when it's in a good mood, and they ask for all these favors. It's like, do you think that this mob boss is just going to give you free favors? So in a sense, it's like you are kind of putting yourself into debt to these spirits. So I think that's why a lot of people in their near-death experiences, they encounter these spirits asking for recompense and payback. But I think in a more abstract sense, what this really is this is just like the pendulum nature of reality. You have put investment into, artificially put investment into an inflation of an aspect of reality, maybe the benefic side of things, the sun, the Venus, the Jupiter, that you find to be pleasant, and now God has to correct that, and by setting the pendulum in the opposite direction, and that is experienced as spirits asking you that now you have to pay back by doing and experiencing this. But I guess my point in all this is that Saturn delays things so you can experience fragmentation. So you can experience different things separately and not all at once. And so it gives us the experience of time. But the greater forces beyond Saturn, closer to God, work towards completeness, holism, and unity. And that's the realm, that's the real meaning of karma, is you can't really rejoin into unity until you have an interconnected experience with all others you've been in situations with. And we should really trust the diamond more because it's the representative of Pluto's interests. The personal diamond is the evolutionary impetus trying to bring us back to that unity of God. And the earth, the world, and the flesh give stability and endurance to the experience of fragmentation. It really does lead to 10,000 things in terms of Taoism, the Tao Te Ching. And the hedonism, the hedonic pleasure principle, makes you want all the positive and to disavow and hide from all the negative. It makes you pull the pendulum back way far on the pleasant side, but in your worldly unconsciousness and animal nature, you fail to realize that it's going to swing back equally hard towards the unpleasant side as a result. Because Earth is all about attachment. It's what causes things to cluster into material forms, like a body or a couch or a refrigerator. It causes atoms to stay attached to each other. It's also the attachment to things outside of yourself. And because things are a pendulum and swing back and forth, the world waxes and wanes. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away and all that, right? So attachment just leads to being heartbroken over and over again, particularly over the course of multiple lifetimes, where one lifetime you're given all the pleasant stuff the world has to offer, and then in other lifetimes it's all taken away and you experience loss. And somewhere in the core of your being, you feel this profound sadness and sense of incompleteness. It's inevitable. If you're going to experience the Jupiter in one lifetime, then you're going to experience the Saturn in another one. And the attachment formed during that Jupiter or Venus benefic lifetime is going to cause that much more suffering when inevitably Jupiter has to swing back to Saturn or Mars, right? So Earth's influence is to create that dysfunctional attachment. And since Pluto is the opposite of Earth, Pluto brings everything back to singularity through inwardness. And it causes heat death and the death of energy. And it causes the pendulum to stop entirely by bringing everything inward to a singularity, right? So those clusters of attachment through heat death, everything disperses, right? And this evolutionary process of Pluto requires you to proceed with non-attachment in order to move gracefully. Otherwise, the evolution is going to be extremely excruciating. Okay? In evolutionary astrology, it's Pluto leads to the end of the, quote, separating desires. And that's why in evolutionary astrology, Pluto is the primary planet they use. It's like I said in my rain or shine video, the zodiac cycle isn't just a cycle, it's a spiral. Pluto makes you spiral up inward to a singularity, and Earth makes you spiral out downward into 10,000 things. So we should really work with the diamond because it's responsive to the evolutionary impetus of Pluto. And by following it over the course of multiple lifetimes, eventually you evolve past these fragmenting, confusing, corrupting, and blinding influences of the world and the flesh. It doesn't have to be meditate, dissolve all ego and whatever, right? People should really trust God. Yeah, people should really trust God. For me, the will of the personal diamond will tell you exactly what spiritual steps you're meant to take in life and will lead to all the necessary spiritual progress. Just trust the diamond and move gracefully through all the uncomfortable steps of evolution it puts you through. Because Pluto is all about transformation through uncomfortable situations. Hell, I mean, the planets of comfort and pleasure, that is the moon and Venus, are in fall and detriment in Pluto's sign of Scorpio. Pluto is the Ouroboros serpent, the perfect circle. It brings completion. So to follow the will of the diamond, as it is a representative of Pluto's will, that is God's evolutionary impetus and goal for your life, is to be perfected and completed. And it brings you to what in Gayat al-Hakim, aka Picatrix, is called your perfect nature, or natura completa, your complete nature. It will complete you in holism over the course of multiple lifetimes. Yeah, you know, if you go look into the diamond, a lot of the old sources describe the diamond as basically kind of being like a morally ambiguous figure, but not morally ambiguous in the figure in the sense that it's not a perfecting influence, but it's morally ambiguous in the sense that it does not care about your comfort at all. Like it will put you on the streets. It does not care. And so you can really see a lot of parallels between the description of the personal diamond and the description of Pluto, particularly Pluto in relation to evolutionary astrology, right? Pluto does not give a damn about your comfort. It's all about non-attachment and embracing whatever may come, regardless of how painful it may be, in order to achieve that metamorphosis. I mean, the diamond really won. The diamond wants you to achieve a metamorphosis as well, to come closer to God. The diamond and Pluto, very, very close. And really the diamond it's not the natal chart itself. It's kind of like what's pulling on the entire natal chart in a particular direction. That's why, you know, there's all these techniques of calculating the diamond. Everybody has their own opinion. You know, the medieval Andalusian scholars were all about using the Almutin Figuras, you know, the Islamic occultists. They're all about using the Almutin Figuras. They believe that you could calculate that one planet as being representative of what your so-called higher self or personal diamond is, the planet that governs your life. In Hellenistic astrology, you have the Oikodespotes, and you have the Oikodespotes, and you have the Kyrios. Some people even think that the ascendant is the ruler of the chart. I think that's kind of like a modern astrology misconception. But ultimately, I agree with Iamblichus when he's like, nah, I mean, the diamond's a little more nebulous than that. It's just something kind of pulling on your being. And obviously your being is very closely related to your natal chart. I mean, that's who you are, that's your predilections. And the diamond wouldn't be the natal chart itself, because that means it would be the same as your first person experience. Rather, it's kind of like pulling on the configurations of your natal chart. It's who you are, it's your predilections, but it's being pulled in an evolutionary direction such that you can be perfected in a certain way. So yeah, I would just like to add that regarding the diamond. I don't practice techniques where you necessarily look at one aspect of your natal chart as being like that right there is the diamond, because really every aspect of your natal chart is significant from an evolutionary standpoint, and the diamond exists to facilitate the evolution of the individual. And in that respect, the diamond has a pretty important hand in every part of your natal chart, and it's pulling on in a particular direction. Yeah, that's something I wanted to share. Anyways, man, people should really go deeper in understanding of simple things like these, rather than being all kid in a candy store like over new, exciting, trivial information. I can spend a week on just one page of a book and get more and more and more information out of it. To me, it's an expression of a dysfunctional Mercury. People think of a negative Mercury as being a kind of shisty con man with a clever tongue, like a salesperson or something. But something I'm realizing a lot is that it also creates a very trivial person. Someone who absorbs a lot of useless, low-value trivia because they're so excited to learn more technical, complex stuff, and they don't have the stillness to go really deep on one simple thing to get the full understanding of it. So many astrologers, occultists, and intellectuals are like that, skimming away in their reading and jumping from book to book, concept to concept, page to page. Let it breathe, motherfucker. It reminds me of William Lilly's descriptions of a good and bad Mercury in his seminal 1647 work titled Christian Astrology. And Lilly says of Mercury, quote, he is author of subtlety, tricks, devices, or perjury. Right? If we're talking perjury, we're talking lies. So we can see a lot of Gemini's negative stereotypes present in this. Right? And then we get to the different expressions of Gemini when it's well dignified. And then we get to the different expressions of Mercury when it's well dignified or poorly dignified. Dignity and debility can be determined a lot of different ways. It can be essential dignity, where a planet is in its triplicity or decan or term. It can be accidental debility, where a planet is in the 6th, 8th, or 12th house. Or accidental dignity, where a planet is in a really good house, like the 1st house, 10th house, or 11th house. But generally speaking, if we're talking about dignity and debility, we're talking about the strongest forms of essential dignity and debility, which are a planet being in its sign of domicile or exaltation, or a planet being in its sign of detriment or fall, right? So keep that in mind when I say being well dignified. When William Lee says being well dignified, it could be all those different ways we can achieve dignity, accidental or essential dignity, but a really strong way of thinking about it is Mercury is in Virgo or Gemini, particularly Virgo, because Mercury in Gemini is in its own sign. It's in its domicile, but Mercury in Virgo is in its own sign and domicile, but it's also the place of its exaltation. So Mercury in Virgo is one of only 2 situations where a planet is in its own sign and is also exalted in that same sign. I make a very compelling case in my Facebook group entitled Mage School as to why Neptune is the same thing in Pisces. I use the traditional reasoning behind how the exaltations were calculated according to the Thema Mundi as to making a pretty rock solid case for why Neptune is exalted in Pisces. And yeah, well, all that to say, if Mercury is in Gemini or Virgo, it's well dignified. And William Lilly says, quote, being well dignified, he represents a man of a subtle and politic brain, intellect, and cogitation, an excellent disputant or logician, arguing with learning and discretion, and using much eloquence in his speech, a searcher into all kinds of mysteries and learning, sharp and witty, learning almost anything without a teacher, ambitious of being exquisite in every science, desirous naturally of travel and seeing foreign parts, a man of unwearied fancy, curious in the search of any occult knowledge, able by his own genius to produce wonders, given to divination and the more secret knowledge. If he turn merchant, no man exceeds him in a way of trade or invention of new ways whereby to obtain wealth, right? So that's saying it's like Mercury can be kind of like a salesperson, right? So that's Mercury on a good day. And yeah, basically it makes you a master of intellectual understanding. One part I like in the description is a subtle brain, right? So it's not like somebody who's very Saturnian, where it's like very practical understanding in very black and white terms. It's like somebody who's very Saturnian, say like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Or like it either works or it's not. A subtle brain is somebody who's like can see all the different nuances and special considerations, right? You break everything down into like every little individual part, and you can see things in very high detail. So you're noticing the little subtle differences and exceptions to rules and stuff like that, right? So that's Mercury on a good day. But then we have Mercury when it's bad, right? We talked about, and when he's dignified, Mercury is of unwearied fancy and curious, right? Mercury is all about, it's kind of by nature has a wanderlust, intellectual wanderlust, and wants to go all over the place. But on a good day, it can absorb information really fast, and it can also think deeply regarding the contents of those things. I have a very close Mercury-Pluto aspect, and it's not necessarily a positive aspect, it's a square, but it's at like minutes, right? It's a very close aspect. So I feel somehow blessed in a funny sense, in that even though it's a hard aspect, it's a square. My tendency is to employ the intellect towards going really super deep, penetrating to the core of any particular thing I'm reading, right? I'm the kind of person, like, literally I'll read a page of a book and I'll put down the book and I'll just spend like 30 minutes thinking about what I read on that one page. You know what I mean? So Mercury on a bad day, though, when it's in debility, right? So that would be in Sagittarius or Pisces, and actually Pisces is the worst, because in the same way that Mercury is exalted and in its domicile in Virgo, it's in its fall and detriment in Pisces. So it's double trouble when Mercury's in Pisces. And I swear, my Mercury in my chart just narrowly escaped ending up in Pisces. Thank God for that. I swear, it's like at the 29th degree of Aquarius. So yeah, William Lilly says, quote, when ill-dignified, Mercury is a troublesome wit, a kind of frenetic man, his tongue and pen against every man, right? So it's a gossiper, wholly bent to spoil his estate and time in prating and trying nice conclusions to no purpose. So yeah, there we go, like really trivial knowledge. A great liar, boaster, prattler, busybody, false, a tale carrier, given to wicked arts as necromancy and such like ungodly knowledges. So you get very, very taboo. So, you know, William Lilly thinks that on a good day, Mercury is about learning secret sciences, but on a bad day, it kind of spills over into taboo and profane things that are better kept secret, you know. Easy of belief, and ass are very idiots. Funny enough, it makes for a gullible person. I can see that. Mercury in Pisces. Yeah, you know, Pisces very, not to speak of myself, I'm a solar Pisces, but Pisces can kind of have like a naivete and sort of passivity, kind of just, it's very easy to like mold or shape a Pisces if they don't have other aspects of their charts that counterbalances that. So yeah, I mean, Pisces can lead to very often a sort of gullible person, easily sort of manipulated, shaped by others, provided that their Mercury is also in Pisces. Because the thing about Mercury is it never goes more than one sign away from the sun. So if you are a solar Pisces, it's impossible for Mercury to be in any other sign but Aries, Pisces, or Aquarius. But most likely it ends up in Pisces, where it is in debility and in fall. Thankfully, my Mercury is in Aquarius, so yeah, my critical thinking is a little stronger. So yeah, William Woolley pulling no punches. Says if your Mercury is in Sagittarius or Pisces, you are easy of belief, you're gullible, and you're an ass or an idiot. Yikes. Constant in no place or opinion. Yeah, that's another big one too. It's like, not only are you somebody who's jumping all over the place to all these different like trivial pieces of knowledge, you're being swayed by everything you read. It's like, maybe this is it. I gotta figure it out. Oh no, maybe this is it. Okay, I was wrong before. Then this is it. Oh no, I had it wrong before. It's like a flighty, you know what I mean, person who's just neither here nor there. All right, cheating and thieving everywhere. So a dishonest person. A newsmonger is a gossiper, pretending all manner of knowledge, but guilty of no true or solid learning. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You are going all over hell's half acre learning all this trivial information, but you have not absorbed it in any depth, and you've not contemplated and integrated it into a way where you have a complete holistic understanding. So you're guilty of no true or solid learning. A trifler, a mere frantic fellow. If you prove a divine, then a mere verbal fellow, right? All talk, no walkie. Frothy of no judgment, easily perverted, constant in nothing but idle words and bragging. Yeah, I bring it up because, dude, it's a problem. I mean, I don't think most people have necessarily an afflicted Mercury, but they have a lot of the characteristics of one. In the intellectual sphere and the more like technical spiritual sciences, people should really spend more time taking things to their depth and understanding them in a holistic and integrated way. Don't be trivial, and more is not always better. Well, anyways, I think you, dear viewer, are as exhausted as I am listening to this video as I am making it. So I think we'll call it a day here. Listen to your diamond. Au revoir. Ciao.